Mm. Okay, so good evening, guys, and welcome to the Hearts of Men online forum. This evening, the topic of discussion is going to be childhood trauma. We have decided that we're going to have a bit more of an open discussion this evening, so we welcome everybody's opinions. We would just like to let everybody know that some of the topics that may come up tonight may not be appropriate for small ears, so please be aware of that. I am going to hand over to Ailen, our safeguarding lead. She has a presentation for us today, but I'm also just going to hand over to let her introduce herself.
Yes, hello everyone, I'm Ailen Mahmoud. I'm the safeguarding lead. That means I'm the first point of contact if anyone has any safeguarding issue. You can write me on the chat, but I'm gonna be leaving my details, my email. So if anyone have any concerns, you can write me. Also, we are gonna be talking about sensitive topics. So if anyone is not feeling unwell and if needs support, you can also write me, and we are gonna be allocating therapy support worker.
Hi, I'm Ayesha. I am trained to be a therapy support worker, but I'm also doing the community engagement. So I am kind of getting participants to join our forums. I'll pass it over to Deborah.
Hello everyone. My name is Deborah. I'm a therapy support worker with BME, and I'm also handling a few things to do with legal and financial stability with our service users where it's needed to get them up and going. Thank you. Oh my!
Thank you, Deborah. And Vanessa?
Hi, I'm Venessa Bobb. I'm a mother with 3 children with complex needs. 2 of them have got an official diagnosis of autism and ADHD, epilepsy, and I've got a grandson who's 3 years old. And my reason for joining today is to talk about trauma, childhood trauma and autism, but I've got different hats to bring to the platform.
Thank you. So I would like to go back over to Ailen, who will be now presenting our first presentation for you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. I don't know, Yannick, can you share my presentation because I'm struggling again?
Yeah, sure, Ailen. Have you emailed it to me?
Yes.
Okay, let's get that open.
Whilst we're looking for that, I thought it'd be an interesting topic to discuss Prince Harry today. If that's what we're calling him. But let me mute.
Okay, so shall I start then, Lauren? Yeah. Okay, so first I want to speak a bit about the statistics. The numbers are from the Crime Survey of England and Wales. This data is of 2019. Some of the important points are that 1 in 5 adults aged 18 to 74 years say have experienced at least one form of childhood abuse. whether emotional, physical, sexual, or even witnessing domestic violence before the age of 16. Other important point is at 31 of March of 2019, 52,260 children in England were the subject of child protection plan because they experienced or were at risk of abuse or neglect. Also, 49,570 children in England were looked after by their local authority because they were at risk of abuse of neglect. There is also around 2,700 child abuse offense recorded by the police. I don't know, can you go to the next one? Yeah. This is just some statistics to see how is the situation. To start, as a definition of trauma, the DSM-5, this Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Health Disorders, say that is the exposure to actual or threat, serious injury, or sexual violation. The exposure must result from one or more of one of the following scenarios in which the individual is directly experiencing a traumatic event, witnessing the traumatic event in person, learns that the traumatic event occurred to a close family member or a close friend. This happens a lot, for example, in domestic violence when the mother is the one that is being abused, or the father, any of the parents. Experience first-hand repeat or extreme exposure to aversive details of the traumatic event. If we can go to the next one. Well, it is really well known that experience adverse event in childhood has a negative emotional, social, and neurological impact. The exposure to trauma during the early brain development will change the organization of the brain. This means that it will produce difficulties to deal with stress later in life. Neglect or abused children, even in the utero, have patterns of abnormal brain. There is a lot to talk about it, but I wanted to go more specifically about trauma during COVID. So can we go to the next one? So this is like a brief of what happened, of how can trauma affect child development. The world is seen by the child as an unsafe, dangerous, and overwhelming place. A child may feel burdened by physical and emotional pain. Children learn to regulate their behavior by anticipating their current responses. So this means that the child is going to learn how to regulate their behavior in base of what their parents are doing. The early relationships that we have will set like a template of how we will relate with the world and others. This means that it's gonna impact in the future relationships that we have as adults. Basically, if when we were kids, we didn't experience empathy, it's really hard that we can know and we can feel empathy. Can we go to the next one? These are some of the symptoms of childhood trauma. Intrusive memories that can be flashbacks, nightmares, or intrusive images. Avoidance, anger, shutting off feeling, hyperarousal, defensive response, sleep difficulties, irritability, anxiety, hyperactivity, impulsivity, language and motor delays, attachment issues, memory and attention problems. Next one. This is about early childhood trauma and COVID. Some of the things that the children can experience is, for example, fear of getting infected, fear that a family member get infected, social isolation, significant changes, because there is it has been a lot of changes during the pandemic, and it can be very overwhelming for the child. Death of grandparents or other family member, loss of a parent job can be really stressful for the kids. There is also a greater exposure of domestic violence if there is domestic violence in the family. During the COVID, this has increased a lot because all the family is in the house. Next one. Some of the short to medium impact can be anxiety, depression, PTSD, dissociation. As a long-term impact, we have physical, social, and intellectual development issues, violent or risky behavior, greater risk of experience abusive relationships, somatization. This can be expressed as a chronic headache or stomach. Impact on the brain and nervous system, weaker immune system, blood pressure, diabetes, cardiovascular problems, and premature death. There is, in the next one, we have some numbers if you need support. The National Domestic Abuse Helpline, Samaritans, Mine, or if you have any concerns. Sorry, Yannick, is the next one. Thank you. So if anyone has any concern about child safety, these are the numbers of Greenwich safeguarding, children safeguarding. That's it.
Thank you, Ailen. So I next wanted to invite Venessa. Hi, Venessa. How are you this evening?
But I'm here. I'm being honest. I was going to do a presentation, but I think for today, I think I had to just speak from the heart, because there's lots of challenges during COVID that a lot of families are not aware of. And at the same time, I think as a parent of 3 teenagers, 2 with a diagnosis of autism, but in particular, because as we're talking about men, I would really gear it around my son, because Nathaniel, who was diagnosed with autism ADHD in 2008, but as a young man at 18 now, is to show how childhood trauma can affect your child if you as the parent have been denied services. So what I've done is I've just written something from the heart. This is something I wrote today, because today, just to show again, is that when you have got a child who's autistic, especially with my son, obviously at the time when he was diagnosed in 2008, was how, no matter how much advice, how much support I was asking, people would turn around and say it was my parenting skills. But I saw my 5-year-old son, where he was the child who was the naughty child, the child who basically was exhibiting negative behaviours because they were blaming my domestic violence I was experiencing from their dad. Even though he may deny it, the children do say they remember it, apart from the older child who's 20. As I said today, what has happened is that my daughter, who is 15, wasn't well, she got epilepsy, she had a headache, she decided that she wanted to go for a walk. This was this morning, and then I get a phone call just when I was going to start to do this presentation, because I don't like to do it like in advance, I like to do it at the time of my moment. I get a phone call from the police. She is in Paddington. So I was wondering, why is she in Paddington? Because my daughter has been home majority of the time and won't travel anywhere, and if she does, she just likes to go for a walk. But then when I got there, the police basically said that where she was going, it's a high area for county line. Now, when I talked to my daughter, I was very calm, because as anybody would know me, is I'm not going to react as the hysterical black mother, because I've been told that that is how I am, and that's how I perceive myself when it comes to professions over the, in the early days. But to know when I was sitting on the train, I had to write what I'm going to read now, because when you're raising an autistic child, but especially a black autistic child, society is not ready for autistic community as it is, let alone when you're trying to talk about autism from a cultural perspective. It's how you, as a parent, as a mother, whether you're married or you're single, but it's just this blanket silence of when you say my child has got autism, they're not interested in that diagnosis. What I'm going to read is basically just to show the flip side. And as I said to everybody in the past, I don't want no pity. I'm just saying it from the heart, because we need to educate. So when Yanni asked me to do this, I did have all these wonderful presentations that I had in my mind. But then when I got off the train to pick up my daughter and the police spoke to me, it just shows how much the community is that we can continue blaming the community, the society, or blaming the professionals. But it does sometimes do start with us as parents, because if we are ashamed to talk about our mental health, if we're ashamed to talk about if our child is exhibiting negative behaviours, that could mean that they're being violent within the household, or they just don't understand. What we're going to create is where we have now in COVID-19, where now everybody is asking for help. I am a volunteer, I volunteer my services, but I can see that the negative impact of where everybody keeps on asking me for help, but I've had to say no to a lot of people because I had to put my children first. But even though through this crisis or pandemic, or whatever everyone wants to call it, autism is not going to go away. The stigma and the abuse or the silent treatment that a lot of parents have faced, but as a black mother raising my autistic son, but the services that were denied for him, let alone when I look at his sisters who were diagnosed with autism, that's the youngest one who's diagnosed with autism, ADHD, epilepsy between 2017, 2018. And the older one who was diagnosed with moderate language difficulties in 2017, which I got the diagnosis after my grandson was born, and I had to deliver my grandson at home. I didn't get no help with that. So where we talk about childhood trauma, if we don't get the help as parents, we're going to continue living in trauma because we're asking for help. But when we're asking for help, what ends up happening as a parent, they start to look at us and they forget about our child. So I'll just read this quickly. So as I put, I have been asked to speak on childhood trauma and autism. My journey is being guided by lived experiences, not by tick the box theories or gaining brownie points to be liked or to be expect any thank yous from anybody. The challenges and the hypocrisies around how society, education, service providers, emergency services, to even family members and friends not accepting the diagnosis of autism. Prevention and avoidance in a crisis, one could blame everyone. Yet the first point of call, when your ASD child has experienced years of indirect or direct discrimination, denied services to the point you feel that everything is against you, what can you do? My childhood and my teenhood journeys, I have painful memories and tried to make sure that my children would not experience the horrors of my teen years. I have some fond memories, but can count them on one hand. For years I was told to move on, don't dwell on the past, forgive and just get on with your life. When talking about domestic abuse and violence, that is another area I was told to erase and things would get better. Like kiss and make up, it will go away. No, it didn't go away because you can see what has happened. A lot of the time when I disclosed about a lot of my childhood traumas, what you found is a lot of professionals and social services, they will use that. So when, we talk about, social services are there to help you. No disrespect, because there are some good social workers, but how can you, when you're asking social services, and we talk about black men, if there's a black man out there who's got a diagnosis for autism and they've been denied that help, and they are an autistic father as well, you find what is happening is if the services is not there, they look at that man, or they will look at the mother and say there's something wrong with you, not realizing that if you don't have those services, you're adding more stress to that family. So it's one's own childhood traumas can be ignored. Don't be surprised that your past will catch up with you in relationships, friendships, to parenthood. to have a child with behavioural challenges that is linked to autism and ADHD, you see how questions can unfold to access why your child acts the way they do. No consideration while they're asking you about what is happening in the home, what's happening in your life, whilst your child has the official diagnosis of autism, but you are still the bad parent. You would expect that asking for help to instead they scrutinise everything about your character. They tell you to go into parenting workshops and everybody seems to just look at you, regardless if you may be the absent father or the absent mother. But if you have got that boy child where they don't have that input or that love or that attention from any family member, they go to school, they're told that they're naughty, they go home, you're just like your father, or you're just like your mother. That poor, I won't even say poor, that autistic child is growing up in fear, because if they don't even understand what autism is, they're at school, they don't understand autism, they're with their friends, their family. What happens, that autistic young person grows up with a very distorted view, because when they see themselves in the mirror, when they read about themselves, when the papers, when they hear music, when they hear everybody say that blackness is not good, that's incorrect. And that's why we need to be very careful what we speak into our children's lives. So I would say for me, I faced many disappointments. I began to feel as at a point where was there any point living? Because every time I tried to do something for my son, it was not good. His needs were never met. I'm here not to be pitied, and I do not have no regrets. I'm sad that it took the pandemic for me to be taken seriously. I say that my life at home now has been the biggest challenge for me, because when I look at all of my children between the ages of 15 and 20, and I've got a 3-year-old grandson, it's like I don't want history to repeat itself. For me, I have to make sure that everything, the negativity, the journey of my son, where he was told that he was going to be nothing, that he was going to be a woman beater because of the violence that he was exhibiting at home. And it wasn't because it was what he was witnessing. It was that he had sensory issues, sensory challenges that would never be met. So I know I wasn't a bad parent, but constantly for any parent out there, whether you are black or whether you're white or in Jewish heritage community, for what I noticed, that for parents, we're constantly judged, we're criticised, we're overlooked, we're bullies, we're ostracised, we're belittled, we're gaslighted, we're lied on. We're told, when you're as a black person from your own community, we experience the colorism, and you've got the unconscious bias views that come throw at us. So no matter where we are as parents raising our autistic child, we're constantly being told it's us. So for me, when parents come and tell me that I have got challenges with my son, and there's no positive male role models out there that can support our sons, the next generation, what do we do? So I appreciate, and I'm so grateful for Yannick when he's come and said, Vanessa, I want to do some work with you, because we need more black positive male role models, because my son needs to see more men out there that he can look up to. I would say the majority of people will blame and shame you. Whilst all this is happening, delay after delay, our autistic young black men are being failed by everybody, and they still don't want to accept the autism. Even though you've got the absent parent, I think it's not fair. I think injustice isn't done, because from my experience, where no matter how many meetings I had, no matter how much, I would say it as it is, how much trauma I experienced with sibling rivalry in my house, the violence that I exhibited, the walking down the road, going shopping, going in on the bus, how my son was, as everybody said, he was a nuisance. No, he wasn't a nuisance. He was being misunderstood, and his needs were never met, no matter where he was. It needs to be compulsory that any absent parent, and I won't say absent father, I'll say absent parent, because there are a lot of fathers out there that are doing great jobs, but they're not getting the resources, and that their needs not being met, because the focus sometimes is on the mother. And people do forget that there are men out there that are being abused, but they won't come and they won't sort for services because of embarrassment, or because the services are not there. Or when you look at the clinical commissioning groups, or you look at Health Watch, social prescribing, are they signposting men to get that support? So for me, I just want to make sure that when it comes to professionals and non-professionals, that they need to learn to understand that talking about autism, it doesn't just go there. we've got to look at the cultural perspective, because my journey where was I would help everybody. But as time has gone on and I look at my children, I look at my son in particular, is society again is failing our community. But at the same time, I always say it starts with us. We have to still look at ourselves, how we conduct ourselves, because today, as I said, when I was going to do this presentation, it wasn't going to be like this. But then obviously, we mentioned about Meghan and Harry. And I spoke to a white mother yesterday, and then I use the word a white mother because sometimes people always say autism is the same. Yes, it's the same. But when you speak about the culture element, when we talk about the color of our skin, the one thing that has come out of this, as I said, I've had more increase of families from the dual heritage community in the last year, because when the Black Lives Matter happened, we had a lot of mothers, white mothers, saying, how can I support my Black child? Because they've come home being blamed for why there's a lot of trauma going on now because of a lot of the riots or the disputes or the debates that was happening on television. So when we look at what happened with Harry and Meghan, people need to understand, people do sometimes ask that question, what colour is the child going to come out, especially if you've married outside your race? So for me, people need to keep it real. And I know when I spoke to this white mother yesterday, her words were, when she looked at the story of Meghan and Harry, she said that's how she felt when she's asking for help. And that was me as well. When you're asking for help for your child, and you've been told that's not gone on. So when they talk about the institution, the firm, that to me is the social services. Social services sometimes fail families because if they don't get it right, it seems what happens is that when they come into our household, they seem to write down information, they write down reports. And then when they go away, there seems to be this cover up. And I'm not going to lie and pretend that all is great. No, it's not great, because COVID, what it's done is opened that Pandora box and it's exposed the failures. It's failed many, many families across all communities. But when we're talking about autism in the Black community, there's an area that needs to be dealt with because there's a lot of stigma, there's a lot of blaming. People don't want to accept what autism is. But I can say for me, as a parent raising my child, I had to get healed before I could help anybody. But despite me getting the healing, I'm still going through a process because now I've had to uproot now, and I have to be where my son was diagnosed 13 years ago. I'm trying now to repair the damage with my daughters. So when we talk about abuse, we talk about isolation, we talk about loneliness, mental health. And when Ailen spoke earlier, it's a good thing I didn't do my presentation because a lot of that would have been all in there. But from an autistic perspective, and when you add on the cultural perspective, and then you add on a Black man, there's triple discrimination. So we need to unpick the mess that the yesteryears have created, and we have to make sure that when we're moving forward in 2021, is not just do the talking, because there's so much talking that is happening, and what we need to do is come together. And as I said, I may not have done this today, but because it was Yannick, I thought it was so important, and I had to honour him by just saying something, because as I said, I'm not 100%, I am hurting, but I feel that I had to do this, and I think that's what I've got to say.
Thank you, Vanessa. It's interesting. I picked up something that I picked up from your presentation. You were saying along the lines of the fact that what I took from it is that generational trauma and ancestral trauma, we're now coming to a point in our generations where if we don't make a change, are we ever going to see that change? And that's something that a lot of Black and other minority ethnicities will experience, is the trauma passed down through generation to generation, not just Black and minority, but all ethnicities, but more so within our communities. And we're at a point now in society where things are changing, things are in front of our eyes. You know, there's so many different things going on. You've mentioned with Meghan and Harry, and I think with me, it was just like, and you also mentioned history repeating itself. And for me, that's what I thought this morning. It came into my head. I thought, wow, Harry was able to see that, you know, there was a crisis that happened to his mum, and that was unfolding in front of everybody's eyes, and then did happen to his mum. And it's just amazing to see that he's managed to pick his family up and do what he needed to do for his family in order to make sure that they were safe and they had the things that they needed. But I just thought it's such a quick transition, and it's been kept out of the public, and it was just interesting to think how much trauma he is actually really going through at this moment, and the pressure that he must be feeling. He must be very torn between his family, well, his birth family and his new family, because that's, you know, when we get married, that's what we assume, is that we marry our families. But unfortunately, it doesn't look like that's what's happened in that instance. So yeah, does anybody else have anything to add to either Ailen or Venessa? Debbie. Hi, Debbie. You're muted.
Yeah, sorry. I have something to add to both Venessa and Lauren's comments. I know you did say that with Harry, it was amazing how he could pick up what his wife was going through and dare to be supportive. Yes, on the other hand, we could say things are changing. Things could be changing for some because they're seeing the changes for themselves, and some people, things have not changed. There is no magic to Harry noticing what the wife was going through. The only reason was because he has faced his own trauma as a child. He saw what his mom went through. He's seen the reality. He experienced the reality. And he knew the end of this. If he doesn't make that decision, it will go down the way his mom went down. Then his child will experience his reality again. And it will go on and on. So he had to make that decision because he knows what was going to happen. There's no doubt about it. It's going to end up like his mom. Then his child will go through that. Maybe possibly his child said, and it will go on and on and on. So he needed to make that decision. And for them coming out, that was good. There were people who are not even married to the royal family who are going through the same thing. And that would be a pick-up call and a lesson for the man involved in that relationship to know, I brought this woman into this family. It's not just the royal family, it's common, it's everywhere. And it's only me that can save this woman, you know, because it's either she's committing suicide or she ends up in a mental home. And to end up in a mental home does not start one day. It's accumulation of things, you know. So what they've done, they might not know the magnitude of help they've given to a lot of people, to make people to you know, to make a lot of people come into realization, especially men who have brought women into the family, possibly the family, but we might not make a change to the family, because when you are the one perpetrating the evil, you might not see it. And it's not just one person, and it's to show people that when you stand aside, yes, it's not the queen directly doing it, or it might be the staffs, but they knew, they even brought it to their attention. But that idea we have in the world, it has always been like this. So let's just get on with it. It's the way it is. You cannot change it. It's very, very wrong. The only way we can change things is if the victim speaks out and if actions are taken. Action cannot be taken if the victim does not speak out and does not, because there is nothing to be ashamed of when you are the victim. But the problem is that the victim is always ashamed, but you shouldn't be. And that notion that it has never been like this, this is the way it is, you don't need to speak, keep quiet, deal with it, we're doing the inside. But when you come out, you're not just only helping yourself, you are helping others. And that's what Harry and Meghan did. They've helped a lot of people without even knowing it, you know. And that is the only way we can begin to change things within our society, because you start with the family and it trickles down to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, Deborah. Any other comments on either of the presentations so far?
Yes, please, Lauren. I have a question and I have a follow-up, I guess, comment, and perhaps even a short document, just a PDF that I want to share. My question, I guess, goes to all of us, but listening to you, Venessa, and hearing some of what you're talking about with regards to Nathaniel. My son, as you know, is obviously 8 years old, so this is what is ahead for me. And hence why when you're talking, my ears are always perking as big as I can possibly listen, because this is the learning that I can take advantage of from him to contribute to what I already know. And thank you as well for being here today. Thank you for sharing. I can hear in your voice how difficult it is, and I know in the background as well some of the other difficult things that you do and have been doing, and what that looks like from a lived experience point of view. But my question is, what are the provisions at the moment around Nathaniel during COVID, with education, with meeting his other needs, the challenges that you're finding, if any? What support are you getting from anywhere? And I'd really like to hear a little bit about, as well, if you can, what support you think you may need, because I think what is often missing in all of this is the support that is afforded to somebody like yourself, that not only works in the community, does so on a voluntary basis, has to therefore take on board that responsibility of working within a community and the demand, I guess, that comes from the community, trying to balance that with being a parent. What type of provisions I'm trying to, I guess, hear from you around you, and are they meeting the needs of yourself, of your children, and your family? Is where I would like to kind of go with that. So that's my question. Picking up on, I guess, what both you and Lauren and what we were talking about with regards to the Meghan and Harry interview that was aired, what drew my specific attention, and relevant to what Ailen was talking about earlier on, with how children, in terms of one of the ways in which childhood trauma can impact on children, and where does it begin, is this concept about a baby blind spot that is currently going and being discussed in Parliament as to the welfare of the mother if she's experienced certain things like domestic abuse and domestic violence whilst pregnant. But I want to expand that conversation, because I want to make this relevant to me in the context of what my mother had gone through. I'm her last child at the point in which I am born, the Civil War, and therefore looking at this baby blind spot, the condition that somebody like myself is born into, and does that have any relationship with what happens with my son today? Because I can't begin to tell you how challenging it is even to just begin to explain this. So I always ramble. I'm going to shut up there and maybe let Venessa respond, and then I would like to share the PDF document just for you guys to see the baby blind spot, and then maybe talk a little bit more about maybe what Meghan may have gone through in relation before she's even had the child, because those are some of the things I was picking up on and thinking, well, what was my own mother going through? And so how was I born? What was her health? Was she happy when during the pregnancy? Was she safe during the pregnancy? Because do all of those things then matter to how I am today? So thank you for Venessa again, and there's my question to you.
Okay, I think looking back, I mean, I'll do the last question. I think looking back when I was pregnant with all 3 of my children, because the question everybody always asks me, which is a bit weird, I think, is first of all was, did I have the MMR? And I'd say I'm not going to go into that one because all my children exhibit autism very differently. But when I had my first child, I did remember the trauma I went through with my ex-husband. I would say I was happy, then sad, happy, then sad. But then my second child, I would say that was a hard one because I think the last 2, I wasn't, so I would say planned, but I did have a lot of trauma in my relationship because I was actually going through challenges, looking back at the flashbacks of the trauma I went through as a child. Because I was getting all I was being told is that my parenting skills was like I was making out that my ex-husband maybe abused my child because of my childhood trauma. But when I unpick it, and when I look back, everybody was telling me it was because of me being pregnant and being abused. That's why my children are autistic. That's what I've been told. So that's something you can ask about, because they were telling me everything about me was I was happy at the beginning, worked in TV, had a lovely lifestyle. But at the same time, I still had unanswered questions of what I was going through. I didn't have the questions answered of why was everything happening to me. When I asked, I was told, forget about it, move on. So I had all these images in my head, but I wasn't allowed to talk about it. So I think the way I would exhibit myself to people, it would be I was overbearing, asked the same question over and over again, told to shut up, move on. So I isolated myself, wanted to be on my own. I think with the last child, I could say that's where it really got bad. And she's the one I think is more traumatized, I would say, because as I've said, I would never expect, no matter how much you talk to her, she knows everything about healthy relationship programs. She's very clued up, but she still wanted to get on the train to Oxford. And no matter how much information you gave to her, it didn't make no difference. When you talk to her, she just said, Mum, and she started laughing. I don't know, Mum, why I did it. I just did it because I wanted to go out. I wanted to go for a train ride. We're in COVID. So I can't speak for her, but I can say that she's gone through a lot of sibling trauma to the point nobody won't listen to her. So she's happy, but she's sad. She doesn't understand who she is. And I would say that is because I protected my daughters a great deal. My son was more protected. He's more rounded because he went to a residential school. But the one thing that was lacking, that was always told, is that he needed more input from black men, because one day when it was summertime, he went to Portsmouth, he got sunburned, and we noticed, he said, why do I look this colour? And the skip turned around and told me he was sunburned. He said, no, I'm not. Black people don't get sunburned. And then they turned and said, no, black people do. And in his head, probably think, what do you know as a white person? So again, this is, if you're professionals and you're able to talk openly, that makes a bigger difference to autistic people than to say, just try to tell them to shut up. But then once he learned and understood, I can have that understanding with my son. Going on to when you talk about help for my children, no. I have for 13 years have been asking for the same help for years. I have been told through the grapevine that I never told, and I'll say it, social services what I wanted. That's a lie. I was very clear in what I wanted. I felt at the time when my son was 5 years old, 6 years old, is I needed respite. Everything they could do, they tried to base it on my parenting skills. No matter how much parenting skills I went on, I ended up becoming, like I said, why I ended up probably being like a book when it came to autism. I had to find information myself. But no, to me, I think no matter how much information you know about autism, no matter how much you go to events, you'll find that those that are in their position, they try to tell you what to do. There's times where people have come and told me that I should go to a second voice, and knowing that I am a second voice. So it shows that professionals are not doing their research, or they're not doing their own homework to find out before they go to that family. They've got to make sure they know what it is that they're looking for that family, because every family's needs are very different. My request was very simple. I just needed respite for my son. I did get it, but it wasn't that much for the year. And when we did, but the person who did look after my son, I found it was somebody from the church, another church that I knew, and that's what made it easier, because she made it easier for me, where she would come and pick up my son and I wouldn't have to take him. But then when I looked at my daughters were the ones that were constantly just left on their own, and I looked at safeguarding. So when we talk about safeguarding, I knew everything to know about safeguarding because I was the one that was, I won't use the word survivor and I won't use the word victim. I would say I overcame what happened to me as a child. But what happens, you're not, it's like you can't forget about it, because when you go and they say, have you experienced what childhood traumas you had? And I disclosed that I went through childhood sexual abuse, domestic abuse. You found they started looking at that, and they weren't looking at supporting me for my son's needs. It was more about me. And then I felt in the end why I locked off, and I didn't want nothing to do with social services because I felt they're wasting time, only to find out late last year that I thought I had a disability social worker and actually had a child protection social worker, because I probably must have been a risk to my children. So these are the things that when people say, what do you want? I told them, but if my child was a child in need, which was under disability social worker, I think I would have got the help. But because they were more looking at me as a, I would say as a risk to my children, because they felt that I was exaggerating my child's behaviour. So when we look at that word fabricated induced illness, I believe they felt I was exaggerating my son's behaviour, that I was a liar. I know because I've seen my files. So no matter what I asked for, I was told the services weren't there. Either I didn't meet the threshold or I didn't meet the criteria. So to me, no matter what borough you're in, I think they have this high threshold or criteria that you can't get the help. And the people that are getting the help, whether they're white or black, I've seen people get the services and their children's needs weren't as severe as my children, and I was still left. So when you talk about 13 years, I've had 13 years where I've just fought and battled with everybody. That means family, friends, because they didn't believe in autism. It's taken Lauren to be in my household, and she has seen that my household is not an easy place to be, because my children don't want to really sit together in the same room. They want to be on their own. They were not like that 6 years ago. This turned like this because I allowed social services in my life, because I had no choice, because I was reported to social services years ago that I was basically mentally ill and I had suicidal thoughts. I did not have that. But again, that looked good for child protection to step in, because it's easier to do that. And for me, they didn't fix the problem. They created more problems for me. I didn't have the problems I had years ago. It's only till my daughter left in 2014, came back in 2016, 17, with my grandson, you know, pregnant, and we didn't know. And I would say my life got worse. I would say it got better because I got to understand more about autism and the system and how they work with teen young mums. Again, that's another area that they failed my daughter, because the services, it was denied because she's back home with me. They've left it to me. So now I've got, I would say, 3 teenagers with all complex needs and my grandson now, who's the question mark, is he got autism? Because at the same time, just to make sure, I'm making sure that he gets looked at so that he doesn't go down the path of what my son went through for the years of no services. So for me, when I ask what do I need, I think it's that thing of trust. Until you can trust people in your personal space, because the problem with us parents or even autistic people, when they ask for help and it's like they say, you've got to say the same thing over and over again. You've got staff that will come and go. Social services, social workers are not consistent. So to my message to anybody out there, if you're going to be a social worker, try and stay in the job for at least 15 years. Or if you know that you're leaving social services, make sure in the files you put the right information, because I can say I've gone into my files and there's things that there were lies, and there was this copy paste culture where even names are wrong. They got my children's names wrong. I got people's other files in my children's files. Again, I should have reported that. So I can say all the negative things I've had. What has kept me strong is that I go to church. And if I didn't go to the church that I'm at now, because the other one was, I would say, not great, because sometimes you can have a perfect looking church, but if you start questioning things, and you know, I worked in TV, so money looks good when I'm paying the tithes, but the church I'm at now, I get all the support I need. I spoke to Yannick about that, and that was, I wouldn't say trial and error, it was that I had to let go of my guard, because I wasn't happy when I was outside the church, but when the church I'm at now, They guided me, they protected me. And as I said, I had to go back to basics. And it was about what love was, because I just hated everybody. I hated the world. I didn't want nobody around my children, because I felt that anybody be around my children, they were going to abuse my children. But what they did, I would say they damaged my children's relationship, because I've got a 20-year-old with a 3-year-old where I've been told I've got to take my grandson full time. I will not do that. I would more take him for the time being to help my daughter, because at the moment she needs the support. She needs to be diagnosed, whether it's autism, PDA or ADHD, because it's not just autism that is out there. There's other hidden disabilities. And I think the community needs to stop saying, you know, don't accept a label, because I've seen the damage that has been caused to my children, my daughters in particular. But for me, what do I need? I just think we just need to know that every borough, the clinical commissioners need to start listening to the voices of the parents, but at the same time, they've got to make sure they're listening to the autistic voice, especially like with Lauren, you know, what's happened to her when it comes to the mental health system. They need to hear the real voices and not the tick box theory, because again, I've seen 13 years of families that have come through a second voice, whose children have ended up in prison, who may have committed suicide, who absent fathers by default, because mothers have lied about the fathers abusing them when they did not. It's because the mothers felt it was a meal ticket to keep the child when they found that there was disability living allowance. I'm going to keep it real. You know, there's mothers out there, they're not good mothers, because before the child had a diagnosis, they had no time for the child. But once they knew the child had a diagnosis, whatever the disability was, DLA looks good. But at the end of the day, if you're not doing your job, that child will end up in a mental health institute because you didn't do your job. So that's what I'm saying. Parents need to take responsibility of their children as well. They can't always blame the professionals, because it does start with us being honest. But like I said, I was honest, but it still backfired on me when they started looking at my skills. So we need services that are go-between, that parents, if they don't trust the local authorities or the services, is to have a provision. There's like a drop-in session where you can go, just like what I do, Lauren's there, or even Yannick, what Yannick does. And if I can't do something, we've got somebody we can trust, then to go directly. We need the go-between, we need the pathway, but we need grassroots that are genuine, and they're not going to carry news, because that is the problem I had, is that I'm a parent still needing help. I've gone to other charities seeking for help in local groups to find out that my business was circulated, because they think because I'm linked to the National Autism Society or I'm linked to some well-established organisations that I should get the help. Not necessarily, because these organisations have tried. But when it comes to the Black element, again, I've got to say that is what's missing. And that's why we need to come together as a community to make sure where are the organisations within the Black and Asian ethnic communities that can come together and support each other. If they don't have the finances, we can work in pro bono, but we've got to make sure that the contracts are there, because I've seen how people can just use your name to look good and leave you still in the problem. I'm not trying to be gory. I am a happy person. I just had a bad day today.
That was awesome. Thank you very much, Vanessa. You said something that was so striking to me there, that trust, and that is so lacking, and that runs so deep for me in terms of what is missing and what is the first step before we start to encounter the other barriers broken. I'm just going to share my screen. Let me get the document ready first. Let's open it. Okay. I guess I'm just going to share this very, very quickly. Spend about a minute. I'm not very good at talking and reading, and so I'm just going to summarize some of what I know the document says, having read it before, and I'm happy to circulate it. But it's obviously a domestic abuse bill. It's a recent one, so as you can see, that's the 8th of March 2021. These are some of the organizations involved. There are many others pushing it forward. We're linked slightly to First 100 Days movement, and they look at perinatal health, mental health and welfare. and domestic abuse or abuse in general, as it pertains to children, is something that they're looking at under this sentence, the baby blind spot. I don't know, does anyone else know any more about this or has come across it? Ailen, Venessa?
No, I now know.
Okay, I will forward it anyway, but it was just a kind
Sorry,
of...
no. I just wanted to add about one of the first things that say about domestic abuse escalating or starting during pregnancy. That's really, really common. I've seen it a lot. Yeah, I've seen it a lot. I just want to say that.
And I guess this is sort of pertaining to the starting point for children, all of us, and when we're talking about...
Have been campaigning for. So that's why I'm particularly drawn to this whole situation now coming to light with the royal family and Meghan and Harry. And I'm happy that they are speaking out about it. I really feel like, I can't remember who said it earlier, but speaking out about things and sharing our lived experiences, it is the way to not only release for yourself, to also to begin your journey to heal, but to help the generations and other people that are, it was Debbie, thank you, the other people that are experiencing similar situations. Anybody else before we move on? I believe we've got a presentation from Debbie again.
I think for Michaela, the youngest one, I think she feels. I think with Michaela, how she perceives and how she sees it in regards to Harry and Meghan, she just feels that she can't understand what the fuss is about, in a sense. When I mean fuss about, she doesn't understand why everybody's going on about the colour side of it, because somebody was saying that they didn't know that Meghan was white, mixed race. At the beginning, that was the first one. That's what somebody said. And I think, I know some people thought didn't realise. So there's that ignorance of, come on, from the time when she got married, from that time, everybody saw the mum. But it's that sort of thing when the dad came on TV, and Michaela's head was sort of like, why don't people just mind their own business? That's her sort of attitude. Why don't they mind their own business? Everybody's got a life. So it's me trying to let her understand, because they're affirmed, they're sort of owned. They're owned, isn't it? They're owned. Once you marry the royals, but then because men married into that family, she didn't realise how much it was going to be traumatising. But what I don't like is that, from my perspective, is when she spoke about the suicidal thoughts and her mental well-being, everybody seems to be focusing on the racism at first. And because when Mr. PM decided to talk about it was all a lie and if it was all acting for the camera, and he walked off the set, again, I know I was watching, I looked away, I didn't even realise, and it was Michaela that came and told me. That's when she realised how much she thought he was a nice man at first. She said he's not a nice man. So it shows sometimes when you're in power, you can do a lot of talking and you can influence the world. But I think when you talk about mental health, suicidal and abuse, people need to be very careful how they're quick to think it's women are lying, or even if she's an actress, I just think it was wrong, because when it comes to Prince Harry, when Deborah, when she explained about history repeating itself with his mum, so PM need to be careful, because I know what I'm going through. I've still gone through all my traumas. I could be in a room and somebody would say, if a woman was going through abuse, why didn't she tell nobody? Why did she stay in the marriage? Or why did she do that? But for me, what I liked about Prince Harry, what he's done, is that he decided to protect his wife, and he made that choice regardless of who his family were. But how I look at it, I'm going to say it on here and I don't care, he seemed to always be the outcast. Because he's turned his life around, there's a lot of jealousy in it as well. So when we look at it, all the racism, all the discrimination, what they're facing, there's a lot of jealousy as well. We've got to keep it real. There's jealousy where they compare her and Kate. And I think, again, for my daughter, when she's seen that, this is where Michaela has to look back, and I try to explain to her why papers do what they do. It's sort of like trying to, people need to look into themselves. But trying to tell an autistic person, I'm glad, Lauren, that you're there, because you can go back and you can explain things to her in a way to tell us that some things you got to be careful what you say, because it can come back and lick you in your backside. And I think for Mr. PM, finally now he had to walk off because he did something where they had 40,000 complaints of when he was talking about mental health. So you need to be careful, because some people do conceal their childhood traumas because they want to fit in. Yeah.
Thank you, Venessa. Yes, Debbie?
Muted.
I have about 3 points to raise. One is to do with organizations. Organizations that tend to want to help people and say they want to help people. Like, I'm sure, Vanessa, you said you are an autistic organization. So when you come to them for help, at the beginning, they're there to seem to help you and listen to what you have to say and take it further. But as it goes further, you find out sometimes they're not helping you. They might be making, because I don't have an autistic, but I have my son, Steph, he's 30 now, he's a grown man. So they tend to want, and at, when he was in the uni, I know some, Vanessa, there's a child that I said he had a breakdown. You go to organization, you think this seems like they will understand you to help you. And as it goes further, you find out that they are making it worse or even not on your side. And sometimes you approach them and say, why are you doing this? You were there to be here for me. And they tell you they are not supposed to take sides.
Mm-hmm.
So they now want to sit on the fence. But if this has been, said in the beginning, that is why I believe that when you are having anything to do with any organization of people, there has to be a set kind of contract, to define what they'll be doing for you and what you are there for with them. So that if there's anything going back, you can say, you were saying you do this for me, to make things clear from the beginning, which was important. Because when they take you to that level, it's like you're in a state of dilemma because you don't know which side, to turn to. You had that hope and it's been dashed. And it's even been made worse. And that was my experience. Then I had to go somewhere. I don't have to go in detail in it. Because even when you met somebody who is like you in that organization and you felt this is it. And going back to parents, yeah, you might have a trauma growing up and you think, okay, I will get it right with my children when you say it. What I want to say from my own experience is that nobody can understand anyone's pain. Even your own child, Vanessa. Let's say you even had, you were autistic, you can never understand anybody's pain. You look at it and say, I've gone through this, maybe it's because of this, maybe my parents went wrong in this way, and I've tried to fill that gap with my children. So why should they have this problem? Nobody can understand anybody's pain. And once we have that, that gives us an opportunity to listen to people and understand. Then the second is to do with Meghan and Harry's issue. It's a real shame to this monarch because they are not the only monarch at present that is married to. Meghan is even a mistress, real black race. I think it's Denmark or so. It's a real black colored woman, and they are not having this problem. And to think that a monarch that I feel that the queen is so religious that he understands. It doesn't matter who said that within the family, whether it's a staff in in the Buckingham Palace or anybody. The thing is that they said they went to the Queen or his father Charles to discuss this, and they believe, oh, nothing can be done. This is the way it is. That's a real shame to this monarch. But I must commend Harry, because no matter what he did, I am a woman of faith. He did what exactly God asked to be done in the Bible. He made the right choice. He brought the woman there, and he protected her, and he stood by her, and it's there in the Bible. So he, in the eyes of God, he has done well to secure his family, and it's for them to redeem themselves. The royal family to redeem themselves, if you want to. It is a real shame if you look at it at all. You know, I wouldn't. At every angle, it's a shame on them, and they need to rectify it and address it. It's not to be walked away from and say we will investigate. That's an easy way to get away from things. It's a shame. Thank you.
Thank you. Have we got the presentation ready for our first? Damn it.
Please come off.
Yes, I'm still here. I can hear you. I haven't come off yet, Vanessa.
I just realised I saw your name for the other one. I'm not good at this Microsoft team.
Things is different, isn't it?
It is. What would you like me to do, Lauren?
We've got. Are we doing the presentations, or are we happy to continue discussion?
Aisha says no.
No.
Aisha doesn't want to do. Aisha, do you want to do a presentation?
No, I'm okay, thank you, Yannick.
No problem. Then we will squash the presentation. It's just us.
We've kind of touched base on a lot of things that I probably would have kind of mentioned anyway. I've been quite quiet throughout just because I've been listening to kind of everyone's views. With the Meg situation, what's going on there has been crazy. This morning I have heard some awful stuff. I mean, a friend of mine who is on Facebook, he's a black young man, he makes music and stuff, but he's just putting his opinion on there and just kind of said his little view, and the amount of racism and remarks that he had been given on social media to the point where they was snapping it and putting it out there everywhere about all different social medias. I mean, everybody should have an opinion on it, and I think what he said was correct because it's everybody's view that we all have now. It wasn't anything kind of rude or anything like that, you know, it was kind of respectful, but it was, we should all be respected, and I think that was kind of the aim of the game. But the way he had been spoken to was just disgusting. It was disturbing. I think people are just really, really rude, and they don't get to understand people who really suffer.
Rude or racist, as Began said.
It's just, yeah, it's crazy. Honestly, I was so shocked to see that he had to kind of remove so many people just due to that.
And this is what we're finding now in the age of social media, is that people are so easy and quick to just tap on their keyboards, and once you've hit send, you've hit send. And I feel like a lot of people, everybody is entitled to an opinion, but I feel like sometimes if your opinion isn't productive, or if it is harmful,
yeah,
there's no need to kind of jump on this bandwagon and, you know, we think this and we think that and we think this. At the end of the day, people have gone through real situations and they're sharing that to highlight and raise concerns and raise awareness about what's going on. And yes, it's healthy to have discussion and debate around these things, but I feel like the highlight is given to, I mean, the amount of memes that I've seen go around since this whole Meghan Harry situation, yes, they are funny, but it's just people are so consumed in social media and just the speed of how things things can be done these days, we lose sight of what the actual issues are and what is that, you know, healthy discussions are based around, as opposed to here's a funny video of a meme of Archie, or here's a meme of Piers Morgan. It's just, yeah, I mean, I'm happy it's been, a light has been shown on this topic, but yeah, I think there's a lot to come from this situation in particular.
Beginning, isn't it?
I guess on the surface of this, we started with Heart of Men Forum, and I asked a question to Venessa about, I guess, her experience, and I guess some of you on here and outside of here, as women and young women and older women, have children. Some may have children, some may want children, some may not want children. But I guess for more children, and not just from a male perspective now, my concern was that welfare to the mother. So it doesn't matter whether the child comes out male or female. What really is happening for her during that period in time. And I think it's really sad, personally, to hear what Megan is having to consider at a time when she's pregnant, and that's for any woman, regardless of colour, as to her welfare whilst during that period, and particularly during that period. And we look to try and, I guess, learn with other organisations about perinatal health. And if we're here today, we're talking about early childhood trauma, and most of us have gone through that, and the statistics Ailen was given earlier on are still going through that. There's so much I think we mask that even in this conversation, the trauma doesn't allow us, we don't yet know to be able to say. And I say that knowing that I was going through things as a childhood, knowing that I'm going through things now, and when I'm going through them, I can talk about them, but after some time has elapsed, and I have a different set of mind. And what do I mean by that? I must be in a different place. I start to plug in things that I was going through that I couldn't tell you at this time. And I guess when we talk about men not being able to speak, those are some of the challenges I have. And I wonder sometimes, is that communication, or what's that all about? And then I speak to my mother, and I did a lot of research into my own family some years ago. And just to find out how my mother grew up, where did she go? What did she do? Was she happy? Was she not happy? I wanted to know. And in listening to her, and I have this recorded because my mom, we were a diasporic family like some of us here. Ailen here's family is in Argentina. So I wanted to take something forward, and I wanted to bring something to my son because he's non-verbal. So those were some of my motivations. But in listening to her and recording that, she talks in some detail about how she had grown up and the trauma that she had experienced growing up from a family cultural perspective. And that had nothing, my mother's never stepped foot, no, she's been here a few times, tell her that. But she's lived in southern Cameroon, where I am from, all her life. And therefore, she's gone through the trauma. I think the structural elements of the isms have played parts in that, but there is also, I think, what Venessa is trying to say is looking at the self and the individual and individual responsibility as opposed to yourself during that period in time. But again, I think it's all research everywhere, all the resources we have, and I know I'm probably no measure of yardstick to do this because it's how I think, you should go into the welfare of a woman before, during, or after pregnancy. When you start to look at PTSD statistics shortly after, it starts to tell you that women are going through a lot during that period in time. And therefore, does that produce a me today that can't communicate emotionally to you, and vice versa? And therefore, is that why we see separation, divorce, statistics, and some of the underlying issues that we see, absence of some of the isms? But those are kind of some of the ideas that I play with in my own thinking based on my lived experiences. And again, these things are what we do and talk about these things, and it's sometimes just us talking about it. I think it's one thing to be meaning well, but I really think we need to find a way of getting, whether it's social workers, professionals, employers, all of those really key people that work closely with us, and families specifically. And so this would be professionals, therapists of all kinds. And this is regardless of color, because what may be useful for a white Irish person may not be useful for a white Estonian person. And to just give that cultural relevancy across board and do make it person-centered. And so I say thank you to everybody for having shared what you have shared with us. I think Deborah's contributions were so eloquently put and fantastic. I'm glad that this is being recorded, because I think this, along with a lot of you will not know, I think Laurent will have an idea individually of some of the work that you have all done in your respective backgrounds, contributes to some of the information that we can use in a consultative way with these decision makers. Because I find having large, big conversations, we have been doing that for a very long time, and so far it's not gaining any traction. And underneath all of this, when we're looking at the external factors now, outside of the individual caring and personal responsibility, are those isms: gender discrimination, race discrimination. And those are things that can be managed externally to some extent. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there as a final thought from me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was just going to say, do we have the questions, some of the questions that were submitted that we can discuss?
I think that what we set out was just to go with the flow today. I think the subject matter as well is quite heavy, and I don't think it should just be something you discuss. I do think when we walk away from here today, it will be useful for us to have some takeaways as well, and things we can do in our respective line of work or wherever to kind of better the welfare of children. That's my priority. So keeping it short, I don't think it's necessary for us to kind of do that. I think we are 20 minutes before the end. I know at the beginning, I've personally had a very challenging day, and I was discussing that with you, Lauren, and Aisha just before we started, and so has Venessa, and I'm sure Ailen has as well, given the nature of her work with us and elsewhere, and that would probably be the same for Deborah and Aisha. So I think, I don't know if anybody else has got any more that they wish to suggest or contribute to just feedback. But other than that, I think we can say good evening, have a good time, and thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
With you. Thank you, guys. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.